This is Abe Friedtanzer from Awards Buzz, and I'm very excited to be speaking with Monica Barbaro about A Complete Unknown. How are you, Monica?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm curious about your lifelong relationship with Joan Baez and when you think that started.
I grew up in Northern California, and I went to a school where we had uh just like lovely arts programs, and we would do this thing every year called the Garden Sing. And I remember Mr. Rojas would like to come out with his guitar, and we would sing things like "This Land Is Your Land" and just a ton of folk songs and Beatles songs. I'm pretty sure there were some Jones songs in there. And like, I think just by way of growing up within that culture, I was definitely exposed to sort of who she was generally in folk music and meaningful music statement sort of lyrics and things like that. And Bob Dylan, of course, but I didn't really have a deep understanding of what she did. It was only when I first auditioned for this role that I started to understand how much of a part of the civil rights movement that she was, and Vietnam War protests, and just like her whole activism journey, and her relationship with Bob. I really hadn't, that was not the context in which I knew her. So sort of knew of her, but didn't know her well by any stretch until it came to this.
What qualities do you think the two of you share?
Share. Something that's come up, I feel like recently in all of this sort of interview process has been, and in working on the movie and reading her memoirs and learning about her, is just that kind of I think that quality of seeming like coming off as relatively calm and put together to people, but having um definitely an internal engine of some anxiety, nervousness. uh there's like a work ethic there too that I think, doesn't necessarily um show when you present sort of calm. um I think some of that maybe, uh energetically, if that makes sense.
I like the first scene that we get to see Joan in the film because it's sort of like everybody's just there, not knowing what they're about to see, and the moment is upstaged to a degree by Bob, but we still understand that like these two people are very talented. Do you feel
Mm.
like this is just as much Joan's movie in certain ways as it is Bob's?
I feel it's very much a movie about Bob Dylan. I think you know James Mangold is such a brilliant director, and he positioned this film to, not force this sort of unnatural storytelling style of like, okay, now we have Bob tell us who he is. Instead, it's as it is, I think, in life, and especially with sort of um, well-known artists, sort of celebrity figures. Like, you find out who they are a lot of the time when you look at how they've affected other people, and in this story it's, inclusive of all these other perspectives and reactions to Bob, with Pete Seeger and Joan Baez and, Johnny Cash, that sort of admiration thing, and Sylvie L's character. You really learn a lot about who Bob is. And I think as far as this story goes, Joan is very much a part of that in history, and it would actually happened. She was at the top of her game. She was, her own. She was a world renowned musician, and at the time that she met Bob, and she was on the cover of Time magazine and called the Queen of Folk. And she was bringing a new, she was like kind of awakening this sort of old stuffy folk scene. Pete Seeger had been doing it for a long time, but she was the face of that, you know, that newfound appreciation of that music. She was like making it fresh and young, and she's beautiful and so talented. And um you know, like she was just really bringing a lot of attention to folk music before Bob even came onto the scene. And so I think that scene, that bit shows that, you know, that like there were these coffee houses full of really interested people, um, you know, listening to her, and when she would sing, you could hear a pin drop, because just everybody would just stop and I think kind of hold their breath, as I've done listening to her songs. Um, and then he came in and not only had a really interesting sound, but had these brilliant words, and they were his own words, and it was his own voice, and that was something new. That was something that she wasn't doing, and so she's immediately drawn to that. And also the audience is, you know, hungry for ways to express what they're feeling, and so and he was giving that community those words. So I that's kind of how I feel that that scene goes, and it's just a reflection of, again, him and how he became known, and how important he was to everybody.
Well, it's nice seeing them getting along, but it's also nice when they don't quite like each other. And I enjoy when we see Joan like barely even stop playing the guitar to give him the finger, which is a pretty impressive move just in everything, and then
It's
just go
just
like
excel.
smoothly into it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what is it like getting to work with Timothy Chalamet? And what was, you know, how much did the two of you interact as actors and then just try to really be engaging as these characters?
Well, you know, I mean, we just kind of trusted our own preparation a lot. I mean, I had heard recordings of him in the recording studio before I ever met him, because we were creating those pre-records, and we both just sort of kept in our own space and our own preparation process, and waited until we were both really musically proficient to meet, because that felt, more in line with how Joan and Bob met, and more beneficial to the film because of that, and to our process. And then by the time we met, we were just so ingrained, excuse me, ingrained in these characters and their lives, that I think we just like, when we showed up as them, it was just a very natural uh chemistry, I think, you know, and felt as close as possible to what we sort of imagined they were like together. I mean, we didn't really sit around and talk about like what we wanted to do with any given scene, or what any sort of goal was, or what we were trying to get out of each other, or, and you know, those conversations can be very useful and very valid, but in our case it was just sort of trusting the work that we had done alone, and then watching the two characters that we built, you know, collide in those scenes with the lovely writing, and just trusting Jim's direction.
Those live music performances, I think, really make the film. Does it, you know, watching it on screen, how does it feel compared to how it was making it? Is it really just so natural, or does it feel like you're recording something? Does it feel like you're just performing even for the people who are also in the scene?
I mean, again, to Jim's credit, it felt as real as it possibly could. I mean, except for the part where there's repetition and you walk in and out again, and you know, pretend you're introducing yourself over and over to an audience. We were there, you know, on stools, standing in front of crowds of people, real audiences. And they're, you know, they're background artists, but they're also like, you know, just like it may have been, you know, New York artists sitting in a room and performing in front of real people who were responding in real time. And so, you know, I don't really have the experience to compare it to, in terms of like actually having ever done my own concert or anything like that. But but it felt very as close as it possibly could to just like being there and performing with a live audience. And also the stage, the set development was so beautiful. It's funny, it's like I was telling a friend of mine, when I go, um like when you do a television show, or when you do other work and studios and things like that, a lot of times when you're watching something, it's hard to be absorbed in it, because you remember that like there was a green screen there, or you remember that that part of the wall was missing, so when you watch it, the room never looks like a whole room to you. But in the case of this film, we were on location a lot, but also what they built was just um so all consuming that we didn't have to really work our imagination as much. And then when I watch the film, I actually feel like I'm remembering the full space that we were in. I'm not like having to, you know, suspend my disbelief or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I remember that room. I remember that stage, because backstage was fully formed, and there were things, like they filled out the crowds a bit in the big concerts and things like that. But there were a lot of audience members there. And I remember, yeah, I was like nervous. I had butterflies. My hands felt a little shaky. Thank God I had like, guitar and something to like put that energy into. Um, but it felt like we were just really immersed in the world. So there again, yeah, it just felt like as close as possible to what it could have been like in reality.
Do you have a favorite musical moment from the film or a song that you really enjoyed performing?
I mean, the music was so fun to do a lot of the time. I think I really love the It Ain't Me Babe music moment, because we also did that at a point when we had become very comfortable performing. Like I had done the a fair amount of the sort of scarier the performances that scared me most, like House of the Rising Sun. I was terrified to do that solo, hold long notes with vibrato and quiet attention and all of that. But It Ain't Me Babe just felt sort of, I mean, there's a lot in it. There's a lot of like history and backstory with the two of them, but it's also like really enjoyable, the song itself, and really fun in a lot of ways. And we only had a few takes to do it, so it was just like, all right, let's hit the ground running. And that was just so fun to sing. And I feel proud of that too. When I watch the movie, I feel like it is representative of everything that I hoped it would be, which is a very satisfying feeling, and I don't feel that a lot.
Well, I'm sure that portraying, a famous figure of any time period is intimidating, but you're also portraying someone who is still alive. Have
Yeah.
you gotten any real feedback on your performance from the real Joan?
We may have communicated about it, but the funny thing is, like, it is a really intimate experience uh to portray someone like this. And I think when that happens, like, to her credit, she's also let me in on bits and pieces of herself that I now feel, I mean, have been beautifully useful to me. And I just feel really grateful to her for that, for the multiple conversations we've had. Um, and then I also feel sort of like protective of her response to everything too. I mean, we talked about, I said to her, I was like, I can't imagine. I was like, I just don't want, I hope you don't feel there's any pressure for you to watch this, because it's not, I can't imagine how surreal that would be to watch, like, people sort of take a stab at what you might have said behind closed doors. And so, like, we've sort of talked about it. And if she ever wants to like make her response public, I'll let her do that. But I feel very honored that she saw it, and I felt very grateful for her response. And I'm just like, it's just like a mind-blowing thing to me that I would ever even be in contact with someone I admire so much too. So yeah, I'll let her respond if she ever wants to. Um, but uh, yeah, it's a very unique experience. I will say that.
I appreciate you respecting her privacy. And I think from what the brief thing we've all seen from the real Bob, it seems like, unlike an unauthorized biopic, this is something that isn't made with the direct involvement, but it's not meant to be, skewering something or sending it up or disrespecting it. But this is something separate. So I appreciate that answer.
Well, well, yeah, and he weighed in on the script, but also um wasn't in the conversation throughout the making of the movie. And Joan handed over her songs, but also but was not necessarily like consulted, you know, aside from like a few conversations I had with her and Ed and some of the actors, like she wasn't, it's not necessarily her movie, and yet she graciously handed over her music. The arrangements were hers. She owns them and she let us have them. So I didn't have to do some other version of her song and kind of pretend it was, but I think what's really cool about doing this movie in particular is that it is about the folk music scene, and folk music is all about authenticity. It's about like unplugging. It's about, not putting a polish on something. It's raw authenticity. And I think that when people talk about them, they sort of allow for that. And I think they've done that throughout their lives. And in this, I think this is another one of those cases. Like they're fun. They're so interesting to watch in documentaries because they're just so honest about themselves. And so I felt we had the opportunity to get to like show, multifaceted people, and to show their many personality traits, because there wasn't that, chokehold on how their story was going to be told, or how they were going to look in this movie. And so I find that to be just really inspiring, that they were, that across the board it was like, yeah, sure. What are you going to say? Okay.
Great. Well, here at Awards Buzz, we follow award season all year round, and I've been paying attention for a while. And this movie was a question mark for a while. We just didn't know. It was one of the, I think it was the last one to premiere. And as we
Mm.
saw with some early awards bodies, was like some love for Timothy, but we didn't see too much. And then now, the Directors Guild America, Screen Actors Guild, your nomination, like this movie is really blowing up at exactly the right moment. How are you feeling about all that?
Well, I've never been a part of something that has been, uh we're promoting its release at the same time as sort of in that awards conversation. And that's a really interesting thing. I mean, Top Gun was like, it had come out in the summer, we celebrated it, it was all like fun and games, and then it was like, oh, now it's this other thing that you have to pay attention to and be, sort of behave appropriately. And with this, it's wild. It's kind of, it's just so new to me to do both at the same time. I mean, we're about to go to Europe, and it hasn't even been released in it's going to be released like mid-January in London. And so we're going to, you know, support it there. And um yeah, I don't know that that really answers your question. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, maybe in a year or two I'll be able to process this. Um but it's exciting. I mean, it's like it's 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 a beautiful thing to have your film celebrated. I think the probably the weirdest thing about all of it is that we just wrapped in June. So it's nice because the research is relatively fresh, but like this, I mean, we waited so long for the movie to like start filming, and then we start filming, we wrap, it's done, promotion, and we're at the Golden Globes the other night. And so like that pace has just been like kind of mind-blowing. But I mean, acting is like that, and the film industry is like that. You just sort of like ride the wave and have a good time. And you know it's the coolest thing ever to get to like meet heroes of mine in the industry who tell me how much they like this movie. I mean, that's like that just, absolutely blows my mind and just feels really exciting. And yeah, just happy to be a part of it.
Well, I know that I had seen you in The Cathedral and Top Gun Maverick for this, and also that you were in a handful of TV shows. But except for Fubar, which I know is coming back for season two, those shows didn't really last very long. And I'm
Mm.
curious if there is a particular one that you're like, that one was the one I really wish would have taken off and people really should have found.
Oh, uh, God, it would make me sound terrible to say no. I mean, I just feel so lucky that I am where I am right now. I don't think that I look back on any of that I don't wish I were still anywhere that I was. But in terms of like the show, I mean, honestly, every show has a fan base that then goes like, wait, we wanted more. Um, I hope I do wish for things like Netflix that they could like finish stories for fans, because and network as well. I wish there was sort of a failsafe for the people who get really invested in the characters, and then it's like, oh, it's canceled, and there are all these cliffhangers, because you spend your time with the characters and you want to seal off those relationships and find out, like the bigger mystery of the series or whatever. Um, so I wish there was a little bit more finality when TV shows got canceled. And I'm just lucky that I've stayed friends with, people I've worked with on multiple projects. Um, but yeah, I don't think I don't necessarily look back and go like, oh, I wish I were uh still, on any particular series. And also all the writers and everyone, like everyone's doing so well. I just sort of like, I think these things kind of ebb and flow, and it's good to have a an understanding that like it's all fluid, and things will be canceled, and hopefully you can just like, I don't know, give the fans some kind of like closure.
I like that. Well, do you know what's next for you? Obviously, you're still in this, but can you talk about anything that's coming up?
I'm working on a film. I'm about to finish it actually, with a director named Bart Layton, who did a movie called American Animals that I really
I
love.
love. I just recorded a podcast episode where someone's like, "What's the one movie you like always talk about?" And I picked American Animals. So I'm in whatever it is. But tell me more, please.
Cool, cool. I mean, I don't really know exactly what I'm allowed to say, but we have an excellent cast, and I really like Bart as a person and also as an artist, which is like a phenomenal combo. Um, and I've most of my work is with Chris Hemsworth on the movie, and we shot a few scenes outside in LA, which was just really cool because you so rarely get to film in LA. And we're like on the street, and I'm like, I drive by here all the time. It's so crazy to be here filming. This is what I thought movie making would be when I moved to LA, but it turns out it's actually just like in every other city that we film and pretend it's LA. But yeah, we got to shoot on the streets of LA, and before they changed forever, and yeah, it's I don't know what I can say about it, but I really like the script. The actors are all incredible in it. Bart is so smart and interesting, and I'm really excited to see how it turns out.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm also curious this award season, what you've had the chance to see, if there are any films or performances that are really sticking with you.
Oh my God. Well, I still have more. I have a lot more to watch. So this is not like, you know, these wouldn't be my, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what like, and awards are hard because I think everyone is like, there are so many performances this year that maybe like so few people will see, but they're absolutely Oscar worthy or whatever. But I absolutely love Coleman Domingo in Sing Sing. I also love that movie. I think um uh there's just some of the, I mean, across the board performances in that movie are absolutely brilliant. I really enjoyed watching The Brutalist. I went to the Vista, which is Tarantino's theater, and it just is like a movie lover's paradise. And I loved the intermission. I loved getting a program. I loved just like the scope of the film. And Adrian Brody's brilliant always. Um, I still have a lot more to watch. Um, Zoe Saldana, I've admired her for I mean, I was like a center stage kid. And so to see her power in that so young, I think really did influence me. And to see that she's just continued that. And then to see that she's done all these other things and utilized those sort of dance skills in a stunt space. It's like something that I've aspired to do. And then, and then to get to see her, play musically and dance and all of that. I find that so inspiring, and got to tell her so the other day, and that was really cool. God, I mean, it just, I'm sure we're gonna get off and I'm be like, and this person, and that, but there are things I haven't seen yet, admittedly. So anyone I didn't include, it's not because they're not like absolutely blowing my mind. I'm really excited that particularly women's performances are everyone keeps talking about how the categories can be like are like really competitive. And I think that that is a dream, and that's so cool as an actress, just to get to see that women are getting, and like particularly a lot of women in the supporting category are like in films with women who are also in the lead category, and that's just like really cool. Like it's a really great year for female performances, and I just find that to be so exciting.
Well, I really appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me today.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for everything at the Astra Awards. That was a great time. I felt very honored.